Natalie, that's a couple minutes. I think we're probably, looks like a decent number of people are starting to flood in. So I think
Okay,
you probably start.
cool. All right, yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie, and I lead our marketing efforts here at Crafted. And we're super excited to have all of you here with us today and really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. So thank you. Before I hand it over to Adam to kick things off, who is Crafted's founder and CEO, I just want to quickly walk through the agenda and a couple housekeeping items. So first things first, we're going to start off with just a quick Zoom webinar basics in case anyone's not familiar with how it works. Then we are going to do panelist introductions. So those are the video screens that you guys see on right now. And then we're going to tell you a little bit more about Crafted and why we're hosting this webinar today. After that, we're going to dive into the panel discussion. That's probably going to take the majority of our time. And then we're going to leave the last 10 minutes or so for a live Q&A. So in terms of housekeeping items, everyone can submit questions as we go using Zoom's Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen there. Depending on timing or if we can find a natural stopping point partway throughout our time together, we'll try to answer a few questions during, but we'll likely answer most of the questions during the dedicated Q&A time that we have at the end of the webinar. And then lastly, this webinar is being recorded, so you will receive a link to the recording as well as other helpful resources in a follow-up email. So I think that's it in terms of housekeeping. So while I turn it over to Adam to get us started, I'm going to launch a quick poll here to gauge where everyone is at in their app modernization journey. And we'll give you guys some time while Adam gets set up and takes the reins to answer the question. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to launch
All
the
right.
poll.
Thank you, Natalie.
All right. Hopefully everyone can see the poll.
Awesome. All right. I will start sharing and we'll keep that poll live for a few minutes here as we get started, and then we'll kind of see where everybody's at. We'll report on that before we start the panel. Can everybody, panelists, can you guys see my presentation? All right, so we're on the poll. Let's move over. Let's do quick intros. You guys don't have to dive deep just yet. We'll get to the panel quick, and then you guys can go much deeper on where you're at with your app modernization journey and how it's been going at your companies, both current and past companies. But let's go around the horn. Let's go left to right here and do quick intro. So Adam, go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So currently I'm Chief Operating Officer here at Product Plan. We build a software for product teams on execution and planning of their roadmaps. But where I'm more focused on this specific conversation is I was formerly the SVP of product at Talent Reef, where we went through a large modernization and tech debt effort starting around the COVID timeframe and going through that process. So we built an applicant tracking platform that focused on the hourly applicants.
Awesome. Go for it, Mark.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Mark Singer. I'm a VP of Product and Design at OrthoFi. OrthoFi helps those who are seeking orthodontic treatment in the United States afford quality orthodontic care. And we also take a lot of the business functions off of the orthodontic practices, such as filing claims, collecting on claims, and collecting from patients for the contracts that they signed. With the main goal of just allowing practices, doctors to really provide a great orthodontic experience to their patients.
All right, Pat, over to you.
Awesome, thank you. Pat Kimball, CTO with Samba Safety. We provide software as a service in the security, compliance, and risk space for mobility. Mobility, giving anybody driving for work, whether it be commercial or non-commercial, we track and manage the risk of those drivers, safety, et cetera, for the communities. Been part of the company for 6 years now and spent quite a bit of time over those past 6 years doing a lot of app modernization, a lot with the help of Crafted.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. All right, Jeremy, over to you.
Yes, so I'm Jeremy Gustine, Director of Engineering at Crafted. I've been here a little over 3 years, and I originally met Adam Oliver at Pivotal, our previous employer, where we got the software consulting. And I've been part of several modernization efforts, from lifting and shifting an on-premises application to a cloud-native platform for Lockheed Martin and the Air Force. Worked alongside Adam Soybert at Talent Reef to strangle their legacy application flows. And then most recently with Tributech to assist with consolidating several of their systems that they've collected through acquisitions. So all challenging problems, but all very solvable with the right team and strategy. And I also just realized I'm wearing the exact same shirt that you see in that picture. I actually do own more than just that shirt. But yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome. All right, thanks guys. Let's dig in a little bit here. Just going to give a quick overview about Crafted, like Natalie mentioned, just to give you a background on why we feel like app modernization is a great niche for us, and we've had some really successful projects in this space. So we'll go just for a few minutes here, and then we'll get into the panel. So at Crafted, what we try to deliver for our clients, and really this is true whether you're a consultancy or a product team, is you need to focus on value, quality, and speed. I think often we see these things as like, how do you make big trade-offs between these three things? And one always has to dip, or a couple of them have to dip to achieve one of them. We kind of feel with the right approach here with app modernization or even greenfield product delivery, you don't have to make as much of a sacrifice as you think. And you can keep the bar of all three of those things pretty high. So we really try to focus on all three of those and find the best balance and maximize for all three of those with our work at Crafted. And we do that, like it says here, with a balanced team consultancy. So at Crafted, what we bring, and we try to teach all of our clients, like if you don't have these three disciplines overlapping in a really good way, you should work on getting that overlap tighter and tighter, more overlap across the disciplines, more collaboration, and then you'll see better outcomes for your business and for your users and customers. So we definitely feel like this model is very important for app modernization or greenfield. So we'll talk more about how it plays into the app modernization side of things. Another kind of thing with Crafted, one thing we do that's different than some consultancies or agencies is like, we bring a lot of product development expertise to the table through those three disciplines, but we stay very tight and collaborative with our clients. We want to pair up with those product teams and help them deliver software. And we think that helps us get, again, to those better outcomes, because we want our clients' domain expertise paired up with our product development expertise, and we can all help each other advance through the problem space and into shipping very valuable solutions for those customers and for those users. Moving on, just one more. So what you're going to hear some themes on throughout this panel, because we know we're very well aligned with, Adam, Mark, and Pat on how we approach these app modernizations. But we do think there's a couple of very core things that you have to focus on. So obviously value. I think we have seen teams that focus on the wrong problem first, and it fails to get some buy-in. We've also seen teams where they focus on too much of the value right out of the gates, maybe the most important and the biggest business problem. But when you're learning how to do app modernization, which is a tricky product problem to solve, you have to have the right kind of size value that you focus on. You don't want to go immediately for open heart surgery, but you also don't want to, clip some ugly fingernails and stuff like that. You got to find the right balance of something that will impress, but also not take you years to get done and has too much complexity. The other big thing that we believe in is iteration, right? This has to be an iterative deliverable showing consistent, continuous progress to your business and to your users. Otherwise, it's hard to get investment. It's hard to keep the buy-in and keep the focus. It'll lose traction. So you'll hear us talk about big bang versus iterative approaches. We are 100% on the iterative approach side of things. You'll hear us talk about a pattern called the strangler approach. That ties into that, to where you can strangle a big problem in bite-sized chunks. And then lastly, with our balanced team model, it's huge on collaboration. We hear a lot of teams talk about like siloing a team off, putting them in a dark space or a different office somewhere, and they'll pop out of this magical place in 12 or 24 months, and it's all going to be done, and you're all going to be modernized. We don't think that's the best approach. We definitely believe in collaboration amongst the core team members of the product development team, but also you got to keep your stakeholders close. you got to keep your subject matter experts close and your users and customers, right? It has to be a kind of holistic, collaborative journey through this thing to ship the best outcomes. So you'll hear some threads and themes throughout this conversation today around those, and we'll anchor back to those and just, that's certainly our opinion of this, how to do this effectively. So, okay, that is it for the crafted introduction. Let me stop sharing, and I will be, before I send it over to you, Jeremy. So on the poll that Natalie had asked, so where's everybody at in their app modernization journey? It looks like you're roughly 20% of the attendees, they think they need this. They kind of know they need some app modernization, but haven't really started. We have roughly 30% that are getting the ball rolling, and maybe they're seeing some blockers and trying to pick up additional momentum and see some additional value. And then it looks like we have maybe 50% that are some way kind of further along part of this journey, maybe starting to ship some modern software, starting to iterate through the process and stuff. So pretty good split. And then that's kind of how our conversation today is going to flow and touch on how we can progress you through that journey and our thoughts on that. So good stuff. I'll go ahead and end the poll so we can all focus and go from there. So Jeremy, over to you, and I'll let you kind of run us through the panel flow here.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'll be less of a panelist and more of just a conversation starter here, but really just want to give you all a chance to tell your stories with modernization efforts in your respective companies. We'll chat about how you recognize the need for it, some of the consequences of not doing it, and we'll see where the conversation goes. But with that in mind, let's go ahead and start with Pat. I'm curious, what brought you to the point of needing modernization? What kind of indicators, company history, and acquisitions led to that?
Yeah. So when I started with Samba Safety, they had just done an acquisition of another organization about 12 months prior, had a couple other acquisitions in the past 6 years prior to me joining. But in total, the total technical debt that they had was well over 30 years of technical debt, going back that far. A lot of old systems, a lot of legacy systems. And so as you look at that and kind of partnering with my peer in product, what they wanted to accomplish with respect to modernizing, pushing the envelope in the space, I knew we were not going to have the systems to be able to cope with that, or to run at the pace or the velocity we would want to. So that was really the big indicator for me that we needed to do something different, and we needed to approach it in a different way, both in process as well as the tech stack and all those facets. And that was what led us to really looking at, past lives, many failures of the Big Bang approach, trying to take that and launch. By the time you get everything out the door, it's completely off target from what you thought it was going to be at. So the iterative approach really resonated with our team. And as we look at the landscape, it was both that iteration piece, but then also the collaboration. We needed to be able to communicate and share with the organization, with the executive team, with the board, what was going on, why we were investing in this, what was going to happen with that. So that transparency across all levels was key to kind of us embarking on the projects.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot, Pat. We'll definitely dig into some more of that. I'm sure you've got a lot of interesting stories there. Before that, let's pass it over to Mark. I think you all are a little bit earlier in your journey. Correct me if I'm wrong at Orthofy, but yeah, curious to hear about your thoughts on the point of needing modernization.
Yeah, that's correct. And, similar story to Pat. Orthofy, while not as long of a history, has been around for around 10 years. We've recently acquired a couple of companies, one of them who's been around for 20 years. And so with any sort of startup or scale up type of business, there are decisions that were made when they were a startup that, where you're building up some of that tech debt, making some kind of shortcut decisions to grow the business, rightfully so, that you need to go back and evaluate how you can modernize your platform, later on. So as you mentioned, Jeremy, we're I'd say fairly early. Some of some of the key indicators that are kind of pointing us in this direction of modernization are just our high amount of capacity that's dedicated towards maintenance and support versus innovation. We track 3 categories of work: foundation, maintenance, and innovation. And using those categories, we recognize that we're pulling down our ability to innovate by having to support a lot on the maintenance side, just with bugs, things of that nature. And as a result, that causes us to be slower to deliver on new features for our customers. So it's definitely a problem that we need to pay some more attention to and create a plan for. Fortunately, we've got people like Crafted and Adam and Pat to kind of talk to say, hey, how did you approach this in the past, and what are some best practices that we could use? So as I mentioned, we're still kind of in the early stages of getting started there, but we have built some nice momentum with the conversations that we've had and some of the data that we're pulling to justify it to our board of directors as well. And I feel pretty good about where we're heading in 2024 in that regard.
Right. Yeah, I think we'll definitely dig into more about how to communicate that kind of stuff to boards and get investment in that kind of work. But Adam Soybert, I'm kind of curious to hear about your story at Talent Reef as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Talent Reef started as an integrated voice recognition application software. So long time ago, you call the phone number and went through the application process on a phone. And over 10 to 15 years, we had gone through an acquisition of a social recruiting company. We had built a number of new product features onto the legacy foundation. And we really got to a point where we had what I like to call this like Frankenstein product that added a bunch of feature functionality onto a foundation that wasn't very stable. And so we experienced a lot of challenges with that. And ultimately, our goal was to sell the company, and our value was extremely diminished because of the technical debt that we've kind of built up over the course of 10 to 15 years. We had an old code base. We had potential vulnerabilities in our code. We had an ineffective and not super intuitive user experience and user interface. And we were no longer the leader in the space. Our competitors were catching up and passing us in some ways, and being more effective in attracting applicant flow, which was first and foremost our biggest challenge that our customers were buying us for. So that was the point where we decided to pause and start to overinvest in technology to tackle some of these problems. And that's where we brought Crafted in around the COVID timeframe to really dive into this and kickstart that product or that process of strangling out some of the technical debt that we built up over the years.
Sure. So yeah, Adam, let's go ahead and stick with you and move on to the next question. What kinds of false starts did you have when you were initially trying to gain momentum for this modernization approach? And how did you eventually get that buy-in from the executive level?
Yeah, it's interesting. We had tried to go down this path multiple times, as I'm sure everybody that tries to tackle this problem has, and you get distracted very easy. The next shiny penny or customer complaint that you have to go and tackle, or you need to drive more sales across the platform. So there's a lot of potential distractions. I think the nice thing for the point at where we were at when we made this decision is we had just gone through a bunch of leadership changes. COVID just started, so nobody really knew what was going on, and we still had the investment from our backers to continue to make progress on this problem. And that's where we brought Crafted in and to help us out and really kickstart and add fuel to the fire. And so there was a lot of challenges and a lot of like stop and starts prior to that point. But really diving in, setting the expectations of what we were trying to accomplish early on, and then making sure that we were communicating the progress that we've had throughout the entire process were key indicators and key things that we kind of committed to ourselves as we kicked off this journey.
Cool. And I know right before Crafted started the engagement with you, you all, I believe, were kind of considering yet again like another rewrite approach. Yep. What was really the thing that convinced you all to go with a more iterative kind of strangler solution?
Yeah, I think day before you guys came in, first day, we had made the decision to take this strangler approach, because at the end of the day, if we carved out a development team to go start to rebuild this from scratch when they came up for air and had a product that we could put in front of customers, it wasn't going to meet even probably 70% of the use cases that our customer base at that time had. So we took the approach of trying to identify our most, not necessarily our biggest problem, but our most impactful piece of our product that had the biggest room for showing success and showing that this process of strangling out this technical debt that we'd built up was effective and was going to provide us impact across the company. And so we chose to do this iterative approach and start to strangle out pieces of the platform. So we didn't just leave our customers kind of high and dry with a legacy product for 12 to 24 months or whatever it was.
Yeah. I think that strangler approach is a really great way to continue to get like value from the stuff you've already put years and years into building while still modernizing simultaneously. Pat, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you. What kind of false starts did you all have? Blockers gain momentum. I know you all had a much older, kind of 30-year-old code bases, as you mentioned. So I'm sure there were significant challenges there.
Yeah, several. I would say we definitely fell for the trick of trying to do the rewrite. We had many conversations about that. A lot of debate, and I would say that was one that was kind of that shiny object. I think you ask any engineer, they're gonna want to jump on that one, do the greenfield rewrite. I can do this in a few weeks. Like, been there, done that one. And then the other piece we had from a false start aspect was there was a shift. There was a transformation from the organization as well on the iterative approach, what that meant, and really pushing on the process to say when we iterate, whether it's a week, 2 week, 3, whatever that term is. We are going to show progress, and that progress may be, small, it may be less observable on a weekly basis, but we're going to continue to move that forward. And I think for the business, it was hard when we came back, week by week, and we're like, great, I've added 2 more methods to this API, and they're like, oh, that's it. And so it was not as glamorous as the big bang to the business side. So there was a little contention there in the early days as we started the project too, and getting them bought into the progress and the process of that iteration and that collaboration with them, and bring them along with us for that.
Did you all kind of like expand the scope a little bit, or the viewpoint as far as like looking at that progress? Maybe it was hard to see it weekly, but quarterly or half yearly, maybe it was a little bit more easy to see.
Definitely. Yeah. It ended up, there was a time, and we've kind of adopted some different communication techniques with the company of defining these bigger milestones. And you're invited to come to any retro or any demo that you want. We're going to do these weekly. But really, this is the milestone we're shooting for, and what we're going to hold ourselves accountable for delivery. And that's really what they were interested in. What are those big milestones? So then that kind of opened up the communication with the rest of the company and got everybody aligned better once we started doing those. I think that when you mentioned scope creep, that's another gotcha that I think we're all guilty of. We're like, oh, I could just add this piece, or I could just add this piece. And I think that as you break that work down and you really target and get very regimented about that iteration and delivering whatever that piece is in that iteration, that's the hard part. So we had a few teams that were kind of going over the boundary and adding other things, and then it was like, oh, well, we didn't make our things this week, or we didn't make our things in this sprint. So those are hard pieces to balance as well, leading to a few kind of missteps.
Sure. Mark, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah.
What kind of false starts and blockers have you all had? I think you mentioned, you kind of dealt with a lot of chasing shiny objects. I'm sure you've got a lot of customer demands. How do you all balance and look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pat mentioned the communication side of it is really key. if we have a plan and we're creating a plan that outlines, hey, we're expecting to go down on innovation while we actually increase on our foundation and maintenance in order to address a lot of these, you're setting that expectation up front, and that helps manage stakeholders as well. The other part of the plan that I'd mention is having a great CI/CD process in place, having something that's going to prevent any new tech debt from being introduced, because you are introducing a lot of change as you're going through the replatforming process. So that's one of the key areas that we are focusing on right now, is ensuring that we have a very robust CI/CD plan in place as we start navigating through iterating on updating our platform. And I couldn't agree more on targeting specific areas that are really impactful, and we've used a number of different approaches around that. One is just code check-ins. Another one, if you want to use kind of like the user-facing side of it, can we target login as an example of an area that we could replatform first, and then show the value of that iteration by replatforming the login process. So mistakes we've made in the past, I think we've probably bitten off a little bit too much, not necessarily big bang, but as an example, our conversion funnel, is that something that we could replatform altogether? And in hindsight, that was probably a little bit too big of a target for us. Could we focus on just that login piece first and then move on to the next step in that funnel and show the value along the way? So that's the lessons we've learned so far, and kind of where we're heading as well.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned CI/CD. That's something I'm particularly passionate about. I think I've seen a lot of projects where companies get to a situation where they've got large, risky deployments. Maybe they do it every 2 or 3 weeks. It's always a big old ordeal. Have you already seen some benefits from making that transition? And does it make that modernization effort a little more apparent to stakeholders and business people?
For us, we're early in that phase. We've recognized the need for it. So we haven't seen the benefit because we haven't had that full implementation yet. But
Sure.
From a best practices standpoint, we have a lot more rigor in place with, code reviews and, unit testing and that sort of thing. And we're moving more towards the full CI/CD in the coming months. So that's kind of where we're heading. I'm hoping to see some great outcomes from that, in a reduction in new issues that are seen currently.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely it can be a long process to do that. Even with Adam at Talent Reef, I think we put a lot of effort into making that transition, and it still took 6 to 9 months to see the return.
Sure.
But great. Yeah, let's see. I'll go ahead and move on to the next question. I'll send it your way, Adam. What was your story of actually getting it started, flowing and shipping and getting used by your customers?
Yeah, we had a little bit of an interesting start because we wanted to pick off a piece of the product that provided a lot of impact, but didn't necessarily mean that we're going dark for 6 to 12 months and delivering some functionality. So we tried to pick off an area of the platform. We chose our application process and our login process, specifically because of the current times. COVID was just starting, and applicants were at utmost importance, and we had seen significant drop off in our application process. So I saw one of the questions in the Q&A around quantifying the ROI. Ours was kind of straightforward for the most part. We wanted to show that our applicant flow was increasing and our time to apply was decreasing. And that was the main goal that we went about solving for. And that's where Crafted came in and helped us do a lot around user research and doing some interviews with customers on their biggest pain points, where they wanted to see that application process and where they wanted flexibility. And then we actually did interviews with applicants as well, and tried to understand what are they looking for when they do an application for an hourly job. And so we went through the process of trying to tackle that problem, not just from the application side, but applicant and password resets and things like that were one of our top customer service calls. And so from an internal perspective, we were able to sell the value of starting with the application because we were able to reduce the call volume in our our support center, and thus give time back to our people to focus more on customer problems and strategy and things like that. So that was the main starting point of how we got kind of started with the app modernization process.
And how quickly do you think you all saw the ROI on that kind of stuff? You all built the new login functionality, fast apply. How quickly do you think your executives saw some of that benefit? Was it still a bit of a struggle to communicate that, or was it fairly apparent?
No, it was pretty apparent pretty quickly. I think historically, we built everything. We didn't buy anything. So there's a lot of different authentication processes out there that you can buy and embed into your system. And we built our own authentication model. And so we removed all that technical debt, bought a process that would allow us to authenticate in a more convenient and modern way. And that reduced our call volume almost immediately upon implementing it. And then from an application perspective, we built a more flexible application process. And how we did that is we had a very rigid process where you had certain steps that you had to go through in order to complete an application. We built it to be more flexible. And we did it in a way where we picked off different parts of the application process, rebuilt it, and then migrated people over to that new application process. And at the end of all that, we went from, on average, 11, 12 minutes for an applicant to be submitted to 2 or 3 minutes for an applicant to be submitted. So there was significant value, and that's how we really got the buy-in from the rest of the organization and the executive team to continue down that path and continue that modernization process.
Great. Pat, I'm going to send it your way now. What was your story at Samba Safety as far as getting it all flowing, starting and shipping to your first customers?
Yeah, that kind of what I was talking about earlier in the change in process, right? The change management of the organization, the engineering team, the product team, helping everybody understand when we say a story, when we say an iteration or whatever, being on the same page with that took time just to get started there. But as we got that ball moving, so a couple of things, and it plays into the ROI piece. We took, the as-is process. We took the as-is systems, whether it was operational management or time for us to deploy any sort of value stories, et cetera, and measured the velocity of the groups. And we said, what's the throughput? What are we really getting through, and in what time frame for those items? And what do they buy? A story, a task, a bug, whatever. And use that to help measure the process and measure the teams for what they were working on and what we were going to increase. And that we use that from the ROI standpoint as the kind of the measure back to the board, measure back to the executive team to show progress, to show impact of what we were doing and how we were changing the way we built software. But it was definitely a slow, I've seen, I don't know if anybody's seen that, you see the graph where it's like a lot of effort, a lot of contemplation, and then all of a sudden you just come screaming down that other side of that graph, and that velocity picks up so quickly. Building on all the points that both Adam and Mark have talked about, with regard to CI/CD, or we're kind of picking off the chunks of that functionality that are impactful but not so gigantic it's going to be a 6-month effort. And really that breakdown and then measuring that breakdown, you start to get both answers to the team that's investing, but then also you start to, as a group, see how much more quickly you're able to respond, whether it's a response to a problem or a response to an opportunity, and how do you capitalize on those? And that's what really started the flywheel for us in the process.
Cool. I'm curious, how did you all balance the investment in tech debt and modernization with the need to produce new features to keep your existing customers and gain new ones?
Yeah, that I would say that's a daily arm wrestle with the product team. But honestly, it's one of those things where, I've kind of coached my architects as anchors and their their co-owners with product on, let's understand the impact of what this tech debt is, and if we delay it, what's the gain or loss there compared to the gain or loss on a story, and trying to help the team, so that balanced team really be able to quantify what is the most important thing. Let's prioritize all of these things in conjunction, but part of that has been, we've had to educate, this security vulnerability or this piece. If we delay it, it's not critical, but hey, we've got a SOC audit coming up and we won't pass that. So, things like that, so that everybody is aware. Again, back to that balanced team, really working as, a team and sharing in the burden of that value versus the tech debt payback piece.
Well, one thing
Sure.
I would
Okay.
add on to what Pat was just saying is a lot of companies fall into the trap of having a separate roadmap for engineering and product. And what ends up happening is the product side ends up dominating, and you end up with like a smaller capacity for engineering work. We want to combine those roadmaps together, look at those projects as on equal ground, and evaluating the ROI that way. So that's something that, I've got a very strong partnership with our VP of technology. We agree that that's a unified vision that we need to bring to our leadership group and our board of directors. And that's a successful strategy where I've seen problems with the other way around in the past.
Mark, I think that might be a great segue, given that OrthoFi is a little bit earlier in their journey on the modernization. What kind of negative consequences have you seen as far as your ability to deliver on, some of those product goals as a result of your legacy platform?
Yeah, I kind of hinted at this at the beginning when we did the intros, but for us, there's a lot of gotchas, and it's kind of a fragile framework that we're working in. So you make a lot of assumptions on how long something's going to take, and then we make a promise to our sales team and our marketing team saying we're going to deliver this feature at this date and time. But when there's so many unknowns because of the scaffolding within the platform, you end up having a lot of surprises along the way, which then shifts a lot of those timelines, and you end up, breaking some trust with your the commercial side of the business. So, replatforming is one way that you can eliminate a lot of those unknowns as you continue to build off the platform, and then create a lot more predictability.
Right. Let's see. Yeah, what else do I have for you? Yeah, so I'll pass it over to you, Adam. What kind of metrics did you track and communicate to communicate successes and your progress to stakeholders?
Yeah, this is a good question. And I think that there's a lot of value in doing this in an effective way wherever you can. So we implemented Pendo as part of this process, and we tried to leverage product metrics as much as we possibly could, whether that was time to apply, number of applications, drop-off rates in certain parts of the application, so on and so on. But we also looked at some other metrics similar to Mark, and how he said he broke things down by where development was spending their time in different categories. We did a very similar process of that, where we broke things down into technical debt, customer-driven requests, maintenance, and innovation. The unique thing that we did with this, and how we kind of got more buy-in from the business, is we didn't just pile everything in a technical debt and just rewrite the code in a more modern fashion. We looked at that entire product and looked at ways to redesign that with the user interviews that we're doing, the user research that we're conducting, and to be a more effective manner to go through part of the application. And so we did a lot of our technical debt under kind of the umbrella of an innovation effort, as kind of redesigning that piece of the platform. From a dev perspective, we also we tracked deleted lines of legacy code. We tracked the bug inflow and outflow. We tracked efficiency, which is kind of a sensitive topic from a development perspective sometimes, but we tracked efficiency more in the fact that not necessarily of how efficient a developer was, but how much more efficient we were becoming by tackling some of these technical debt areas of our platform. So there's a lot of things that I think you can get creative on to show the value, but it's really important to continue to hammer that value home as much and as often as you possibly can. I felt like a broken record through the entire time that we were going through this, and basically saying the same thing on a weekly basis to the executive team, to the board, and to the entire company itself.
Right. You kind of hinted at this, Adam, at, not necessarily framing a lot of the technical debt as technical debt, but more like new features and new products. I think you can approach the modernization from a few different angles, of course. One of them that Crafted definitely advocates for is that more like user-centered approach. So if you think at it from the user's perspective, full vertical slice through your system, it may be easier to pitch and get done and modernize the entire experience for even your customers. Pat, what's your perspective on the collection of different metrics and communicating that progress to your stakeholders?
Along the lines of kind of what Adam and Mark were talking about, as well as when we started, we had 0 metrics. So we were ground zero. We were honestly not even monitoring performance of systems and applications. So we had a lot, kind of a big road to climb, but leveraged a lot of the tools in the marketplace. Pendo's one we've just started to adopt over the past year. Prior to that, we used a lot of kind of the APM tools, some of the app decks, measuring tools, things like that, in order to at least understand the experience that our customers were going through, and kind of worked back from that. And then as we moved internal and we focused on the process, we focused on the process metrics, cycle time, lead time, all the throughput, velocity metrics, et cetera, in order to give the teams, and this was critical. It's one of those pieces, right? You want to position that as, this is a tool for you, dev team, to better yourself. It's not for me to sit here and use this as a weapon or, beat you over the head with it. But more of, here's how you can improve. Here's what your metrics are. And there may be things where you do want to go faster. You may be just going as fast as you want, and you want to make sure you maintain that. Like, how do you get steady state? So enabling the teams on that, kind of educating them on what those metrics meant. And then obviously, the quality metrics, the bug metrics, defects escaped from dev, all of those types of things focused around, are we delivering quality kind of in that as soon as possible, right? The shift left mantra. Can I solve that? So that's a code coverage from a testing standpoint. Are the tests meaningful? Are we doing test-driven development and really pushing on that? And I will tell you, the test-driven development is still a challenge for us. Like, that's a different approach for most engineers who haven't done it before. And so getting them bought in on the process and why it's valuable and why that's going to help them write, better code, better output.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that team perspective. I think we've talked a lot about like the executive kind of stakeholder level, but getting the actual teams bought in as well can be a challenge and is critical to success. Mark, again, you're a little bit earlier in your journey, but what kind of challenges do you anticipate as you kind of move towards that, as far as getting team buy-in and getting them to adopt some of those strategies to modernize?
Yeah, the scope creep problem is probably the biggest one on my mind as we think about replatforming. What does great look like? And then, let's compare that to the timelines that we believe it's going to take to actually get there. So how do we find the right balance of doing this the right way, while also not, handcuffing the business to, 5-year timelines, let's say, to actually get something done. So it's definitely a mix, and working with the engineering partners to find the right formula is going to be pretty critical to getting that done, and then communicating that out to the rest of the company and stakeholders.
Sure. We have just a few minutes left. I'd like to leave a little bit of time for a Q&A, but I'll pass that over to Adam S. as well. I think you all had a ton of success modernizing at Talent Reef. I think you all even kind of handpicked your team members for the initial pilot, if you will, at the modernization. What else would you recommend as far as getting a team to, perform and execute in the way you'd like?
Yeah, it's tough, and it's definitely a balance. And I think you need to prove that, you need to continue to prove that the value that you're getting from that modernization is more effective and more efficient than continuing to fix bugs or do things that you've been doing for 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, whatever it is. And really dive into the problem at hand and dive head first, and try not to get distracted by customer complaints or the new shiny object that's out there that you want to deliver on. And I think our biggest struggle and one of the biggest challenges that we had was you'd have a customer complain about a certain area of the product that you have plans to rewrite or redesign at some point. This doesn't make a ton of sense in adding on to the technical debt that you already have when you have plans to reinvent that in a different way soon in the future. So it's a tough balance, because obviously there's a lot of different goals and objectives from the rest of the executive team and the rest of the department or the company. But you have to be aligned on what your ultimate goal is. And our ultimate goal was to deliver a more efficient and more effective platform and a more modern tech stack. And so that was priority number one in every conversation that we had about what we were doing and why we were doing it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it sounds like you had some challenges moving from a maybe more sales driven kind of backlog towards having that commitment across engineering, product design, executives. Sounds like that's kind of a critical thing to really get that done.
Yeah, our ultimate goal was to sell the company, and we weren't going to do that and get the value that we wanted to get from the company with the tech debt that we had in place. So in order to solve that, we had to address it. And that was the goal number one.
Sure. Cool. Well, Adam Oliver, I'll pass it over your way. Are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we've got a couple in here. So I'll read the question off first, and then we'll decide who wants to take a crack at it. But one question is, who was the very first stakeholder or teammate you all approached about an app mod project? And then what were some of the questions that those people had to start the debate on whether or not it was worth it? So where did those steer through the organization, and who do you find yourselves talking to try to make a case for it? Pat, you want to, I know you've been working on some of this iteratively over the years. You want to speak to how you've addressed some of your internal stakeholders?
I would say, kind of the first kind of decision to make the jump or, attempt to modernize the apps. There was a lot of conversation between the head of product and myself. We were lockstep on that. What does that mean? What could the value be, right? What's the market opportunity? We wanted to build the financial case, the business case, to kind of hang the carrot out there from that side. And then on the technical side, being able to make the case for the challenges, whether it was slowness in delivery or problematic or bug riddled output from the teams because of hasty processes or lengthy processes. And I think as we did that, the first person we sold into was honestly our CEO. She was very bought into, like, how do we move the needle for the company? How do we really do it? So the business aspect of that resonated with her, and the benefits we were also demonstrating from the technical and engineering side were a bonus from her. I think that there was already clamoring in the company around from our sales department, our operations department, like, can we do things better? Can we do things easier? So there wasn't much from a sales standpoint that we had to go get buy-in that way.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So kind of CEO first. Mark, you're in the midst of a lot of this, and I know you're having a lot of conversations. So tell some of the stories. How many conversations are you having? What directions are they going? Who's it with?
Yeah, so we kind of similar story. We started with the CEO, have kind of expanded that to our COO as well. There is a lot of evangelizing, I'd say, you need to do to kind of create that story and justification. So, going out to the other members of our leadership team, my peers in marketing and sales, helping them understand the story and bringing them along for the journey. so that you have kind of a team understanding of where the problems are, the approach we want to take. Ultimately, though, you do need that CEO buy-in in order to be successful, because there are going to be times where those shiny pennies, as Adam S had mentioned earlier, come up, and you need to make some of those prioritization decisions. And without that buy-in, it's going to be a tough road.
Definitely. And Mark, are you seeing this yet go up to the board level? Are you guys putting together business cases at that level? How's that kind of process flow with getting it on the more strategic roadmap?
Yeah, the board is very bought into the categorization of where we're spending our capacity. So we're talking in a common language with them, and they understand. They're agreeing with us on the direction of, hey, there's some near-term opportunities from an innovation standpoint we need to go take care of. But once you do that, let's go really hard on that app modernization to shore up some of those parts of the platform that need to be shored up, to then set up ourselves for innovation later. So I feel like there's some common messaging, common language, and agreement all the way up through the board. We just need to stay consistent with that messaging and stay consistent with that plan.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So I've got two questions here that are both somewhat related to valuation and ROI. So Adam, I'll kick these over to you first. So one of them is, can you share what the difference in valuation was for your business after doing the modernization? I know you'll have to decide how much you can share there. And then the second question was, were you able to quantify the ROI of these app mod projects versus kind of just continuing to deliver features on the existing train? So yeah, talk about your perceived understanding of the value once you got this started and started delivering value.
Yeah, I can't share some specifics about the difference in valuation, obviously, but I think we weren't completed with the project when we did sell, and I don't think we would have sold had we not started this app modernization process. So I think we painted the picture, we painted the roadmap of where we were going, and got buy-in from the ultimately company that bought us. And I think it was a good exit for us and a good time for us to do that. From an ROI perspective, we definitely were able to quantify it in a number of different ways, specifically around some of the product metrics that we had around time to apply, application flow, drop-off rates. Those types of things were very front and center to our operational and sales teams, and they were actually able to turn that around and sell some of that value, even though we weren't necessarily diving 100% into all innovation and building out new features and functionality. We were able to still show that there's more value in the stuff that we're doing because you're getting more applicants in the door at the end of the day. So we really kind of leaned into those product metrics and leveraged them as a competitive differentiation for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. Yeah. Another really good one here that I know you guys will have good perspective on, and I think it also helps the buy-in conversation. So this question is, what line item or category does app mod project typically fall under in a budget or balance sheet? I think in my experience, but you guys tell your own here, is like, because you're writing net new software, you're innovating on it and you're advancing your asset, right? You're not just building, fixing bugs and things like that. In my experience, it can be a capitalizable asset. That's definitely a great way to make a business and financial case for it because it's the long-term assets of the company. Well, let's start with you, Pat. Is that accurate, or how do you guys perceive that on a financial?
Yeah, any piece of improvement that we've done on a platform, we kind of look at that. Is that a one-time improvement, or is it a continued improvement? Like, is it going to continue to appreciate? So from a financial standpoint, we'll categorize that as an add back for a one-time type of an event, also advantageous on the balance sheet, or capitalized software.
Yep. Okay. Adam, Mark, any other ways you've heard about thinking about that, or?
We didn't capitalize our development costs, where we were operating in agile sprints and iterating very quickly. So the overhead of capitalizing those development costs didn't make sense for us.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll
Mark.
see what our CFO says.
It's
Yeah,
honestly,
but
it's a debated. It's debated
Yeah.
even by our CFO and the PE firm that backs us. On one facet, there's a tax advantage and kind of a balance sheet advantage. On the other side, from a valuation standpoint, it's the first thing that comes off the list from a valuation aspect. So, operationally helpful, valuation not so much.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. All right, we have 3 minutes left. I think more or less we'll cut it off here. But any last parting words of wisdom that if you're like that we didn't touch on in these questions, that for people listening here, you're like, hey, be aware of this or think about this to go help your case and help your efforts. And I'll just turn that over to any of you that has anything.
I think from my perspective, one of the biggest takeaways that I think made a lot of impact as we were going through this process is from a road mapping perspective, don't just focus on what's left and what you need to do, but also look back on what you have done over the course of the 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it is, to make sure that you still keep that in mind as you're looking at this, because it's very easy to forget about what you've already accomplished and just focus on that next thing. And this allows you to continue to look back at all the progress that you've made over a course of a period of time. So I think that's a really important piece of that, is making sure that you're looking back and showing that success and celebrating it.
Yeah,
Sure.
use data to tell your story, and then just over communicate. Even, talk about it, evangelize it, bring people along the journey. That's the way you keep that buy-in, keep the priority, and I think we'll have success using that approach.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Measure everything, right? That's the easiest way to quantify that return, that value delivered.
Yeah, great advice. All right, everybody. Well, we're right at the top of the hour, so we want to let everybody get back to their days. We really appreciate everybody joining. What we'll send out is a couple of kind of white papers on balanced teams and app modernization specifically that tell more of this story in depth. But Adam, Mark, Pat, can appreciate you guys more. Thank you for joining us. You guys have a ton of wisdom here in getting this done. So we appreciate it. Jeremy, thank you for moderating, and Natalie, thank you for helping set up and market this event. So cheers, everybody. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Cheers.